Welcome back, listeners. This week I'm joined by an absolutely incredible guest who has been described as a CISO, a hacker, an InfoSec safety stuff cyber researcher, plane hacker, cow hacker, and all sorts of names on the technical side of the world. I think my favorite is he's a Scottish cybersecurity warlock. So, Chris Roberts, welcome to the Adventures of Alice and Bob podcast. I want to really kick things off with a fun question. If you could describe yourself and your career using a movie title or a movie theme, what would it be and why?
Oh, oh, that's a good one. It's probably a Bruce Willis one. I mean, let's face it. It's got to be a Bruce Willis one or what's his name? That did the shoot up. Bruce would probably not be a bad one because I mean, he bundles through life, gets shot, gets blown up, shit happens to him. Touch wood, in the end, he manages to get through it most of the time. And in real life, he seems to be a pretty civilized individual. Famous last words, those will come back and bite me in the ass at some point.
Yeah.
But he seems to be a pretty civilized individual. Yeah, I mean, I can relate very much to the first one of the Die Hards and probably most of them actually. They get a little bit more ridiculous. Kind of like the Fast and Furious, the first one or two of those were pretty good. After that, all reality just went out for a long walk off a short cliff. Let's face it.
I think my favorite Die Hard, like the extreme it got to, was one of the films where they shoot a helicopter with a car. I thought, yeah, do you know what? We're onto something here. This is a franchise that's going to stay.
Which was the other one? Where the hell did he jump onto the back of, like, I want to say it was like an F-35 or something like that. It's like from a crumbling road, and he jumps on the back of this F-30, and I'm like, yeah, same thing. Like, belief has now been suspended. Game over. Have a nice day. But yeah, it makes for good escapism for now, so I'm not going to complain too much.
It's going to be a Die Hard film. So we'll add to CISO, hacker, InfoSec, safety cyber researcher, plane hacker, Scottish security warlock to now, I'm Bruce Willis of cyber. I quite like that. Yippee-ki-yay.
I got that, although my beard's a little bit longer than his. His is Hollywood sensible scruffy. Mine is just out of control, Highlands, whatever the hell happened to it.
Yeah. Well, I have a similar beard, and it's amplified today by the mint green onto the wooden background of my door. So I look very ginger today, which is quite funny as well. My white balance is all out on my camera. It's great. So I'll stick with the ginger beard of cyber, and we'll
That
go
works.
from there.
That totally works.
So through all the chaos, when was the moment you realized you were in cybersecurity?
Probably when we were inventing this shit as we were making it up, let's face it. Yeah, it's probably when I came. So before I went into the military, we were doing like the early days of IT and networking and stuff like that. I mean, it was screwdriver in one hand, literally floppy disk in the other hand, along with, installing dip switches and stuff on network cards. So, and that was in the days of, moving from 4 to 16 megabits token ring and all that other kind of shenanigans. And then we all, this weird thing called Ethernet came along and screwed everybody up. That was like early IT days. And that was also behind the scenes. It was a little bit, quite a lot of, shall we say, dial-up warfare and some interesting fun stuff with CDC back over in the UK. And then went into the military, jumped out of airplanes for a living, came out of that late 90s active, and then went into reserves and did other things. And probably started off going from like just traditional IT more into the security space, probably at that point in time. Because I'd gotten yelled at a few times for doing things I probably shouldn't have done. They kind of threw me into the, right, well, now you can legitimately go do things you shouldn't have done. You can do them for us, and we need to know the results. So that was that. And then, that was probably late 90s, because I came out of active, went into reserves towards the end of 90s. So about then, and then I got sent over to the US in 98. So, and then it was really all security from there.
What sort of roles did you kind of pick up along the way? So I've seen you've had quite a varied history looking at your bio and working through.
All sorts. I mean, both inside the So I've been, for good or for bad, I've sat on both sides of the fence. I've sat on both the corporate side of the fence. I've also sat on
Hmm.
the vendor side of the fence. So when I lay into vendors and sales and marketing and BDR and stuff like that, I'm not doing it from a position of, sitting on my high horse, have no clue how it all. No, this I've had to do that shit, and I've had to do it for companies. I've also had to build my own companies.
Mm.
Some successfully, some, they'll write books about how to create it, and I'll get mentioned in it. But it's always been, from that side of it, it's always been the ability to actually go out and talk to people. So it's been everything. It's been from sitting down and taking the genesis of an idea and building a company around it, to working inside an organization, deception technology, intelligence organizations, and various other ones, and going, okay, how do we do this more efficiently? How do we do it more effectively? All the way through to walking into the burning building and going, all right, sit down, shut up, let's get this shit sorted out. 6, 12, 18 months later, handing the keys over and they're going, don't fuck it up again. So, and now actually back to that CISO role inside an organization doing somewhat the similar thing. So, to your point, I mean, I've done everything from hands-on keyboards coding stuff through to strategic sitting down in front of boards, which is what I'm doing as well now, having to explain the what's, whys, and wherefores and educate them in a way that they understand it and know it and learn and all those other kind of things.
One of the things I was going to ask you about seemed like a bit of a big red blinking light, like I have to ask the question about this. Working with DARPA and nano and biotechnology, so full-on brain scientist and doing like nanobots to engineer us, or
Fun. Oh my gosh. So this was, gosh, when did we start doing this? 5, 6, 7-ish years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Obviously breaking into shit's easy. I mean, let's face it, otherwise people wouldn't be making billions of dollars on the side doing it. But that's technology. You take it the next step of evolution, now you start looking at the humans. Now you also start looking at biotechnology and nanotechnology and stuff that's working in the healthcare medical field. And all of a sudden, you start to look at this whole convergence idea. You start to look at okay, how do I influence a human? Well, at the moment, I influence them through news, media, social, their systems, their architecture, all the other stuff that's around them. Then you take a step back and go, well, let's step forward 5, 10, 15 years. How do I influence a human then? And you start going, well, we're converging the human and the technology to such a degree that we're putting biotech and nanotech in. Why can't I influence them that way as well? So there was a project inside DARPA that was actually a very, very different focus. So when you put folks out in theater, you're obviously asking a lot of them. You're asking them to be very situationally aware, very tactically aware, and then very strategic, which, if you're under fire, is a rough thing to do. First and foremost, it's how do I not get my ass shot? Secondly, it's who the hell's shooting at me? Thirdly, how do I actually make sure that doesn't continue? And you're not thinking at a strategic level to go, oh, there's a computer sitting in the corner, or there's these other things going on. Now, from a theater management standpoint, I also need to know that information because I need other factors that maybe are not inside that particular room or that building or that house or that location to know what's going on. Asking the operators to be able to do that is a rough thing. So what we started looking at doing is, how can we take out secondary and your subliminal thoughts? How can we take some of that out without asking people? Plus, also the other thing is as well, if somebody's going into a situation, how do we not have to send them back in again a second or a third or a fourth time to go collect more data or do anything else? In other words, how do we send them in once, put their asses in harm's way only once, not put more of our folks, pick your country. I mean, US obviously is where I'm based, but take anybody who's an operator into a situation. How do we not have to send them in 2 or 3 times to get more and more information or data and intelligence? So now you start taking a look at what the brain's doing versus what you're able to articulate. And you're like, well, I can pull more signals out of the brain. And so we started looking really, really heavily at what can we pull out of the brain that maybe the operators aren't able to tell us. So we started looking at tactical analysis, situation analysis, and all sorts of, basically we started reading the brain. And it was, oh yeah, there's some fantastic stuff we're messing around with. But there's a limit as to how much you can take out without drilling in. Little Elon and his little freaking, his let it burrow into the brain shit is not something you want to do. So we looked at basically using literally sets of tactical glasses with sensors on them and all sorts of other things to go, okay, what can we pull out signal wise and how close can we get? The brain's effing amazing, but unfortunately the signals are very, very low power, so they don't necessarily get out this far. You're like, well, we'll amplify them. Well, how do you do that? When you start looking at the nanotechnology and you start looking at the attunement antennas and things you can build with nanobots. And we were looking at this because the healthcare industry is obviously doing the best it can. Rather than irradiate a freaking body, it's let's just try and actually hit the individual cells. So they're building some amazing tech which you can inject in to go after single cell systems, so you can go after Alzheimer's, cancers, and all sorts of other shit. So we're like, okay, can we use that to get where we need to? Can we do this? And that's great. But then we're like, well, shit, we can hack this stuff. Uh, and bless their little con sucks. The healthcare world is all about saving people, and let's face it, most of us are like, oh, how can I kill somebody? And we unfortunately figured out very quickly that we could actually reprogram these bloody things to do what we wanted them to do. In other words, instead of them going after cancer cells, we got them to go after red blood cells, which is a bad thing. Killing red blood cells in the body, not good. Doesn't do the body good. All gets all messy. Yeah, unfortunately. So we ended up doing this whole bunch of nanobiotech, but it was all to try to amplify signals out of the brain, but it ended up turning into these other kinds of tactical use-ish situations. It was good. It was fun. It was something I would love to go back and do more of at some point when I've done building supersonic jets and all sorts of other stupid shit.
Well, that was going to be kind of my next question to ask. So, supersonic jets at Boom Supersonic, and you're the chief security officer. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. It was for some ass about face reason. They decided to bring me in. It was actually so Charles Valentine is freaking amazing. I have a ton of love for him. He's the CIO over there. And he hit me up because about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I just gotten to the point where I'm just done dealing with my own company again. It's hard freaking work. And I was honestly done chasing clients for payments. And I'm like, I'm just done with this shit. I'm done writing reports. I'm done telling the same people the same shit time and time again. I need a break from this. So I put a post out on LinkedIn, said, I'm coming back into the industry. What the hell's out there? And I was very, very, very fortunate. Again, back to this imposter syndrome. I got some really nice, I had some very nice conversations with some very well-known folks.
Mm.
Charles hit me up. He's like, hey, you want to have a conversation? I'm like, yeah, come over to the house. So we sat down and he's like, how do you fancy securing the next generation of jets? I'm like, I get to play with supersonic lawn darts. And he's like, yeah, pretty much. I'm like, fuck yes. So went through the official process, still had to go through the full interview process, and got to meet some really interesting people. Some of them were absolutely fantastic. Some of them are now, work colleagues, for crying out loud. And my final interview was with an amazing lady called Kathy Savitt, and she's one of the, she's like 2IC at Boom. Her and Blake are like left and right hand of the same voice, which is actually fantastic. Kathy comes from the industry, knew my history, knew what I'd done to airplanes in the past. But what I loved about the conversation was it was really nothing to do with that. And it was more a case of like, how can we take some of the stuff you want to do and be the leaders in the industry? And that for me was a fantastic thing. It wasn't just, hey, how do we build something? How do we do it right? How do we do it successfully? How do we do it leading the charge? How do we go to the established people and go, hey, love what you've built. Here's how we can do it better. Here's how we can do it more efficiently, more effectively. So that message was absolutely fantastic, resonated. And for some ass about face reason, they offered me a job. Now, I go to start the company, I go to start at Boom, and unfortunately, some of the folks from my prior life, who I might have annoyed once or twice in the aviation industry, showed their displeasure to Boom by registering a formal complaint and all that good silliness. So, good. I appreciate Boom. They were like, yep, we brought him on board for all the reasons that you didn't listen to him. So that was appreciated. And it's been good. It's been like any CISO job. There's good days and then there's bad days. And there's days you're like, hey, this is really cool. And there's days that you bash your head and you're like, how do I affect change? How do we do this? How do I balance people and technology? How do I get this to work? How do I make sure I'm not on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow?
And I was going to ask a bit more about that actually. So, in terms of where you spend the majority of your time, is it focused on, I'm concerned about more of the human element of cyber because that's, always one of the easiest links to exploit, or do you spend a lot more time worried about just risk as a whole and reputational risk in the organization?
Ironically, reputational I tend not to think about as much. I keep an eye on it.
Hmm.
But for me at the moment, it's I think it's overall probability and risk conversations. I mean, I always remember standing on stage describing this, which is, when you're building an airplane, it's a Lego model. You are bringing in thousands of different vendors and partners, suppliers, and everybody else with this common vision to put all of their bits together to build your airplane. And that's now living and breathing that all of the vendor risk management, the third party, the supply chain stuff, all of the conversations about our intellectual property sending out to people. Because of what we're doing, Boom is basically the first commercial, and somebody can fact check this one, but I'm pretty darn sure if I get it right, the first commercial company that's not properly government funded or run inside the government that's building a supersonic jet. And so we're having to take what's really restricted, confidential, classified information and work shit out for ourselves. Like, hey, how do you build a supersonic jet? Well, that's classified. You have to find it out. I'm like, holy shit. So we're basically in the commercial world building what everybody else has got hidden behind these, restricted doors. That in itself obviously gets governments and people nervous. So we have to be very good at how we protect the data that we're building. But we've also got to share it to all those Lego makers to make sure that their little bit of the widget actually helps make this bloody thing go supersonic. So it's a balance. It's a balance between that and the human aspect of it and going, how do I get better visibility? How do we get better eyes? How do we know what we don't know? It's avoid to discovery. We see something on an alert and it's like, where's that from? Well, then go figure this shit out. Or we don't have this on alert, right? Grab this in. And you can't do all of that on your own. It's why you look at partners and why you look at vendors and supply chain on our side of the fence and go, who do I trust to work with? Who is going to be there as a partner walking next to me? The podcast Danny and I do. It's why I reference Maria more often than not, because you can't do this shit on your own. It's got to be part of a team.
And I was going to ask as well, with the, I guess, incredibly regulated industry that is aviation, have you found there's sort of any sort of disconnect between what the regulation needs versus what makes practical security sense that's pragmatic?
Yeah, in other words, red tape versus reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Although, again, back to the nice thing about it is having Kathy at the helm for some of this and having the organization listen has been fantastic because, to your point, regulation says this, but reality is somewhere very different. The nice thing about it is if I can explain what we need to do in a way that those team on the business and the folks that are facing the legal, the lawyer, the FAA and everybody else, if I can explain it to them in a way they can understand, then they can fight the good fight to go, hey, this is what it says, but hey, this is where we need to be more efficient or more effective or how we do it differently. Some of that stuff's happening. More of that definitely needs to happen, and I think will over time. But again, it's one of those where you affect the nice thing about being on the inside now, because for a long, long time, I was on the outside of the transport throwing rocks at it pretty vigorously, let's face it. Now being on the inside, I have the ability to affect change by leading from the front and going, hey, here's how we can be better at it. Here's how we can be more efficient, more effective at it. Here's how we can do it in a way that doesn't cost an arm, a leg, and several other appendages. And it's good. It's a little scary, and we'll see what happens, but it's getting there.
It sounds like an incredible amount on your plate, or many plates of spinning and keeping things running.
Yeah, it is, because it's, obviously there's the CISO role for digital cybersecurity. There's the physical role. I've also got physical security that I work with as well. I also have, the new buildings we're putting up at North Carolina, final assembly, the stuff that we've got in Denver here, the jet that's out in Mojave, and all the other stuff that's going on. There's a lot going on. And then you've got to balance that, which is we're pre-revenue. I mean, yes,
Mm.
we have commitments for these things. We've got quite a number of them, which is actually pretty fantastic. And again, huge amount of kudos to the business for that. But we don't have money coming in the door insofar as like people are paying us money and we're handing over a jet in exchange for money. So now you're balancing all this with the fact that we are operating almost as a bloody great big startup. And you want to be able to do all these things, but you can only do these things. So you got to box really freaking clever on quite a lot of them. So it's an interesting conundrum, should we say?
And I guess thinking about that balance, how do you find your own balance personally? Because podcast, projects, work. What do you do? Is it dog walks and whiskey that keeps you sane, or is there more?
I'm probably one of the worst people on this planet to talk about balance. Let's put that out there first and foremost. I'm really good at talking about it. I'm really good at encouraging others to do it, but I'm absolutely being useless at doing it myself. Um, I I enjoy my work. I enjoy what I do, and that comes with a sense of always being connected, But then I do take time, like after the whole diabetes shit and everything else like this, I've gotten to the point now where I have to take time, and then I'm taking that time on the bike. Milo says he's curled up over here. Milo tends not to want to go for much in ways of walks. Otis definitely does, but I'll take time with them. At night times, I'll split my day up. So my day starts, 8, 7, 8, 9 in the morning. My day starts, and I'll go till 6 at night, and then I down tools. At 6 at night, I down tools. It doesn't matter who, what, when, why, but tools are down, and then I take time. I take time to cook. I take time to hang out with these guys. I take time to go for a bike ride. And then I get back at it 10, 11-ish at night until probably 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. But then that's my time. My time to do research, my time to like prep for podcasts, get all the prep work done for LinkedIn posts, and a bunch of other things. And it's not perfect. There's stuff that's outstanding. I got a project, I got a report that's outstanding for something that I was meant to have finished a couple of months ago. And I haven't had the focus to deal with it. And same thing with a couple of others. And these are projects that are outside of Boom. This is like some personal stuff I do behind the scenes. There was some stuff somebody asked me to do to help them out doing some research on a couple of people. I did the research, I gave them the answers, but writing the report up, it's not happening. I mean, it'll get to it eventually, but there's not enough hours in a day for what I'm filling it with, which means I need to say no more often, and I'm not the best at doing that either. So I'm getting better. It's like perfect example. Like normally this kind of a podcast would in future fit in on Friday afternoons. I'm getting much better at saying, hey, vendor meetings and podcasts and stuff like that now go on my Friday afternoons. Like from noon onwards is all when I try. And if it doesn't fit in a Friday afternoon, guess what? It's next Friday. So I'm getting better at it, but it's definitely, I am not the best at it, should we say.
I think there's probably a lot of our listeners who can really relate to that as well, particularly where it is a passion as well as a job.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough because, I got into this industry because it was intriguing. It fit who I was as a human. I tried when I left school at what, 15, 16. And from 14, 15 years, I was working night shift in a kitchen. So there was a dairy that was literally a walk from the house, and they worked 24/7. And so I worked in that dairy at nighttime doing kitchen work. I would go in, I was short shift cook at night. And so I would do that at night and then get up and go to school and stuff like that. When I left school, the first couple of jobs I had were, I worked in a research council as just a general admin person, filing shit, literally, and filling envelopes. That didn't last long. I think I managed to last maybe a month there. I worked in a warehouse I worked in 2 different warehouses. One I worked in, I remember walking in and there was this relegated ladder. I go, going to be up the ladder, and I'm like, and I'm out of here. And the next one, it was literally taking like panels and putting them on the thing and taking them off and doing that kind of shit. And I think I lasted a couple of days on that one. I did data. I tried all. So I lasted 4 days at McDonald's, 4, maybe 5 days at McDonald's.
Gosh.
Oh yeah, Big Mac. I couldn't figure out. This is somebody who can fucking hack NASA on a whim. I couldn't figure out how to put a Big Mac together, the right order for like the two buns and the turn this bun and do this and
Like learning a magic trick. Now switch the button underneath and do this.
yeah, I just couldn't grasp it. And so I tried all sorts of different things. I when I left the dairy, I worked nights and weekends in another kitchen, and we changed the menu every week, and that place was fantastic. That taught me skills that I still use today when I cook. But it was, yeah, I mean, I tried all sorts of stuff, and I fell into this industry partly by accident, partly because I got yelled at a few times, and so I fell into it and I loved it. And I've let's face it, I've only left it a couple of times. Once I took 6 months off to go climbing down in Bolivia, and then I took time off again to go climbing up in Alaska, and that's been it. For the rest of my life, I've been in this industry.
I think as well, you're very well known for being a regular presence at a lot of industry events, a lot of online talks. Um, what's been some of your most memorable times at conferences or talks?
I think in more modern times, it's the whiskeys. Because I'm, to your point, I'm kind of known for bringing a whiskey case or two with me. And for me, I like it for a bunch of different reasons. And I have to give credit to a couple of other folks for. There were a lot of us that always used to bring stuff with us every now and again.
Mm.
And this is going back way, way, way many years ago. A couple of good people had started to basically do like a whiskey talk at B-Sides in Las Vegas. And so I got invited to that, and that was really the catalyst for like, holy smoke, this is absolutely fantastic. I love the idea of not just bringing a bottle or two, but bringing a few more. And there was some amazing people at it, and just some amazing folks, and I owe them credit for a lot of that side of it. And so we kept doing that year after year, and I would bring more and I'd bring more. And then I started bringing the whiskey bottles to other conferences like not B-Sides, like over in Israel, Cyber Week in Israel.
Mm.
I've taken the whiskey, and I'll be taking another one out in a couple of weeks' time out there. But it was always one of those where I like it because I get to share. I get to share whiskeys, bourbons, tequilas, rums, and everything else. And I have my tea. I keep my tea for those that don't drink as well. And I like it because I get to share. I get to have fun. I get to have some amazing conversations. I get to impart things that are not tech related, but I also get separation.
Mm.
I also get a little bit of space because there between me and other people is this table, and I have my stuff on my table, and it's like my space. I feel, and I found I can deal with people and I can deal with conferences better if I have that little bit of separation. If there's not there, then I can deal with it for a couple of hours. Then I have to literally go off and go hide somewhere and just go curl up in a dark corner for a couple of hours, just kind of like breathe a little bit more. Go, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. It's all okay. And then I go back out again. And I, I, yeah, I think that's been good. Those are good. I think just some of just the camaraderie at the conferences. And it's tough because there are some amazing ones, even if you go to like the big ones like the RSAs and Black Hats, there's still these little pockets of amazing people that just get together and you get to hang out. But then just the crazy ones like the B-Sides. I was up in Lancashire in the UK about a couple of months ago. And
Mm.
when I'm heading out to Israel in the end of this month, I'm actually stopping off and doing B-Sides Leeds briefly. I'm going to stick my head in and go say hi and give hugs to people. And I like that. It's so freaking good to go see other people. I was in the Middle East. I was out in Saudi. And it actually was the first time I'd been out to Saudi since being out there in uniform, for crying out loud. We got deployed from Riyadh out to the sandbox a couple of times. And
Mm.
just just the different ways that things get approached, the conversations, the camaraderie, the people, the just all of that is absolutely fantastic. I get to meet people. I've got on LinkedIn. There's so many people that I get to talk with now. I get to actually see them as a human being, and it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, I love it. I mean, even like out in, I was out in Q8. I remember I got asked to come out to Q8, and Dr. Reem, and she's all over. Like she's freaking amazing, and yet I've never seen her. it's one of those amazing people that I mean, I've seen her. She's fully veiled. So I get to meet her, and I can't hug her because that just blows. I'll get yelled at if I hug her, but just so freaking amazing to meet her, yet not meet her, if that makes any sense.
Mm.
Yeah, get to meet her, get to hang out with her, get to see the vibrance and stuff that she comes with. I met her a few times now, but I've never bloody seen her, and it's a really interesting, just a dynamic as to how the brain works now, thinks and everything else. So I like that. Some of the traveling can be a pain in the ass. Some of it works, and some of it doesn't. We have an amazing community. We have an amazing community. There's some great stuff about it. I mean, there's some frustrations. No two ways about it. There's too much drama. We're like a dysfunctional family with, an estranged aunt and a couple of cousins that don't fucking talk to each other. But for the most part, this is an amazing community.
It leads me into some of your memorable experiences outside of the conference circuit and with the community. And before I ask you about the planes, I was going to ask you about cows and camels, and whether you could tell us a little bit more about your work in that area.
Oh gosh. Oh, that was pure by accident. I had so much fun. I was driving. The hell was I going? So I was going to Wyoming. So I'm based out in Colorado, and there's a boring way to get to Wyoming, which is to go straight up I-25 and cut across to I-80, I think it is. But there's a more fun way to go to Wyoming, which is from here, you literally head straight to the hills and go over something called Rabbit Ears Pass, go into whatever the hell the next place is. And there's these gorgeous back roads. They're just freaking gorgeous back roads. Now, some of them you can put your foot down, and the speed limit is what the speed limit is, but what you end up doing versus what the speed limit is, there's a little bit of a discrepancy, shall we say. And so I'm humming along the road doing the speed that I'm doing. And normally I'll have a laptop open next to me, and it's actually sitting up there. It is an ancient, we're talking ancient Dell. In fact, hang on, I'm getting the damn thing. It's an ancient Dell laptop, and we're talking ancient, okay? It is ancient enough. This thing, and hell, I've got my sister. This thing is ancient enough that it still has a PCMCIA card in it.
Gosh, and the color. Back when we had silver laptops. Oh,
it's got the Jinx hackware stuff on it, for crying out loud.
wow.
So I keep forgetting I have that on there. So I still use this laptop, and I plug it into antennas, and this thing's broken into more things than it's probably ever allowed to say. But I was driving along, and this thing's sitting next to me. It's got an antenna, and this stupid antenna the thing keeps beeping at me. I'm in the middle, nowhere, northern Colorado, Wyoming. Okay, there's nothing around. There's no buildings. There's no people. And I'm like, why does this stupid thing? And is it the 2-wire stuff that the first responders and everybody else used? And it wasn't 2-wire stuff. Is it SATCOM? No, not SATCOM. Is it monitoring stations? No, couldn't figure it out. I pulled over and fuck this, can't figure this out. So I pulled over, and this thing's just beeping, and I'm like, there's nothing around. Whoa, there's cattle. So I'm dressed in my normal pajama bottoms and hoodie. I hop the fence to go make friends with the cows. Cows are looking at me like, is it friendly? Is it not friendly? Can I charge it? Is it going to milk me? Or what the hell is it trying to do? I get close-ish to cows, and I suddenly realize that, 800, 1,000 pound of bovine is either going to be happy with me or is going to try and stomp me to death. I shouldn't get too close. But I ended up realizing they got their tags in them, but they're also wearing something on their foot, and I couldn't figure out what the hell. I couldn't get close enough. Hop back in the car, and I'm like, all right, what the? And I managed to phone, thankfully, had signals. Tell their phone, their pedometers, and what I figured out, and a bunch of research on this one, and a bunch of just watching forums, is what they're doing with the cows is a lot of them will wear a pedometer on them. So as the farmers scattered across several thousand acres, they can actually research, is the cow moving? How is it moving? Is it healthy? Where the hell are the stupid things in this acreage? So that if he's got to go turn them into beef burgers, he knows where to go find the stupid things. And a whole bunch of other statistics. Well, this is freaking cool. But what's also cool is it all goes into an Access database. And I'm like, yay! End up starting looking at these things, realizing that most of the cow automation and also the milking automation stuff is all running off like Windows 95, Windows XP, maybe Windows
Awesome.
2000. If you're lucky, oh yeah, access databases up the wazoo. So I get onto good old Showdown and I start running my own scripts and doing my own stuff and finding all these places. And I'm sitting by the side of the road staring at these damn cows going, you're mine. Get into a couple of these databases and realize that they're also pulling the GPS signals, updating like every 30 minutes or so. And I'm like, play? Wrote a quick script after downloading my version, signing up for my own, cow herding system and everything else. Figured out that I could overwrite the script and drop all of these cows into a friend's place back in Arvada, Colorado. So literally by the time I got to where I needed to get to, up near, up by, where the hell was I going? I don't remember where I was going. I was going up somewhere up north. By the time I got to where I was going, I'd literally, in the entire swath of cows in northern Colorado, most of Wyoming and half, were all physically where they were, but digitally there's about 750,000 head of cows now sitting in 1 square acre of a house in Arvada, Colorado. So yeah, that was fun. And, that was interesting and got yelled at for that one, but so much fun to do.
I was going to say, what happened when people realized that? Like, what was the reaction?
Yeah, but it was, I basically ended up writing a VB script that basically called the access script that basically just every 29 minutes or something, I don't know what the hell it was, just overwrote their GPS coordinates with the coordinates for Alvada. Luckily, all I did was kill it reset itself, and the cows all appeared where they should have been. But it was so much fun just doing that. And the camel thing was similar, but they're using both RFID chips that are embedding in the camels. And what I ended up doing there is I didn't just move them. There was a herd of camels. And this is in Saudi. This is in front of His Excellency's, like his prized possession. By the way, those fucking camels are expensive. They're like millions of US dollars, these stupid things.
No way.
And what I ended up doing is finding somebody who was herding his cows using these pedometers, using a Chinese satellite system. Ended up getting his database or their database, and then I ended up swapping the databases over with the camels in Riyadh. So now this $8 million prize-winning damn camel is sitting somewhere in the steppes of Mongolia, despite the fact, physically it's in front of this poor camel herder, but virtually it's somewhere in the steppes of freaking Mongolia, being chased around the damn hills with a guy on a motorbike. Fucking awesome! So much fun to do.
So you're the first, I guess, like, cyber cattle raider. We can add that to the list of accolades.
What's crazy on this one is there's still, on the statute in Colorado, there is still cattle rustling, which is like a federal hanging offense or something, I think, if I remember rightly. But I'm figuring that's in the physical world. I didn't actually touch the cow. Now in the digital world, different discussion. Yeah,
technically it was the device, not the cow.
Camel and cow rustler. Yeah. When we think of computing, we think of security, we all think of these traditional systems that are in front of us, the system we're talking on now. We think of that. Some people are now starting to think about their phones and their mobile devices, but rarely do we get people, especially outside of our industry, to think about anything else. The fact that the toaster's listening in and talking to Siri, and Siri's getting pissed off with the microwave, and nobody loves the fridge, and everybody hates the television. On a network level, nobody has a clue about until shit goes wrong, at which point in time everybody's like, well, what the hell do we do about it? So it's always interesting to get people to think a little differently that way.
Well, I was going to ask you about thinking a bit differently with planes as well. I think it'd be really rude of me not to bring that up with you on the podcast.
I got to be a little careful on that one because obviously the role and position I'm in, but
yeah.
So we started messing around with cars, and this was 2008, 2009, because we did a talk at the second ever B-Sides in Vegas. It was actually the second ever one. A couple of us did a talk on taking out cars, and then we went out to the strip and demonstrated how to take out cars. It was quite fun. We started stacking them up on the strip because we get into the Bluetooth module, shut down the engine, do all sorts of other stupid. It was fun. We actually played Tetris.
Like connected devices on the CAN bus type.
Oh
stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Got you.
Much fun. Unless you get it wrong and you inject the wrong PID ID, at which point the airbag goes off. Not something I want to repeat again. Definitely left one of those like, whoa moments. We started messing with cars. And then what ended up happening, one of the major airline manufacturers has said, we're going to put this new technology that we've got into cars into aviation, and we're like, play. And so started doing a bunch of research, like a ton of research. And it was everything from what networks, how do they work, what systems, what architectures, who's doing it, how are they doing it, all the other stuff, all the way through to literally calling up the supply chain companies and going, hey, we're building an ABC and we're doing a DEF and we need the interface architecture for this. What do you have as far as like a model in this? And they'd send us the stuff, or they'd tell us where their VBox instances were, and we could just go grab copies of them. And we ended up basically building ourselves on the ground an entire set of aviation systems. And it's like, all right, well, what could we do to them? How could we influence them? And at the same time we were doing it, a couple of folks over at IO Active were doing it, and they were focused on going in through the wireless systems and everything else. Our focus was ground control systems as well as through entertainment systems. And so it got to a point where we realized we could do quite a lot of things that we probably shouldn't be able to do. And then went to talk with the aviation industry to say, hey, here's what we've discovered. How can we help things be more efficient, be more effective, and everything else? And unfortunately, we got rebuffed. Thankfully, nowadays, that situation has changed. A huge amount of kudos to Aviation Village, huge amount of kudos to at least one of the major airline manufacturers that's actually decided to embrace the research community. The other ones got some work to do. We've obviously stepped up and we're at the forefront of that conversation as well to go, hey, look, we're building the next gen one. How do we become more efficient and more effective at it? But it was rebuffed, and I tend not to take rebuffs very well, so ended up going public with it. And on one hand, things changed. On the other hand, it became a pretty tangled mess. So yeah, some good stuff and some challenges and some stuff I'm still paying for. So it is what it is.
I think just highlights, like there's so much out there with connected systems, tracking systems. You know, we've evolved faster than our considerations of security in those devices. That it's kind of nice to shed a light on this.
Saturday, I went out for a bike ride. Colorado's having an unusual spell of wet and soggy weather, which is actually nice because everything stays green and we need the water. Saturday, there's a break in the rain. I throw the bike in the back of the car. I go for a bike ride. Get off the bike, finish the bike ride. I'm like, hey, I need to get something for the bike that I have down at the office. So I go into the bike shop. I'm literally walking. I'm in the bike shop and I walk by where the repair place is. And something I never thought I would ever, and I'm actually going to do a LinkedIn post on it one day. I never thought I would ever hear. I'm walking by and there's this lady with her bike, and she stood there and the service guys just handed it over. And he basically says, well, madam, your bicycle firmware has been updated. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Come again?
Yeah, and that was it. I'm like, bicycle, and I suddenly thought, e-bikes. I mean, the proliferation of e-bikes. I mean, and their buggers are expensive. I mean, first and foremost, bicycling, just regular bicycling has become like an expensive hobby. I thankfully have used Craigslist. One of my bikes is actually from a ridiculously good. Eddie Mize got rid of one of his. I've got his Yeti bike, and then the other one I picked up Craigslist one, and so mine were not thankfully the stupid prices, but bikes are fucking expensive, and these e-bikes, I didn't think about it. They're all sitting on firmware because of the batteries, because of the operating system. I'm like, for one part, I started giggling and I'm like, oh, I know what I'm doing soon. So yeah, back in the back of the research is a whole bunch of other, let's have some fun with it. We messed around with scooters. Justin Monoblano, he and I were out at RSA pre-pandemic, and he was walking around the street and I caught up with him. He's cuddling a scooter, you know, these the e-bike scooters. He's cut. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, I'm taking you back to my hotel room. And I'm like, do you need a private mode? He's like, oh no. And shit's coming to pieces. And just, again, GPS tags and all sorts of other stupid shit you can do with these things, de-restricting them. Yeah, so scooters, e-bikes, the whole lot. I think that's the next frontier for what can we do to wage digital war on people.
Well, I'm going to ask you now about digital war and more around what ethical challenges do you anticipate we're going to come across in the next few years? Because this stuff isn't going away, right? It's only the proliferation is getting worse and worse, if you like, of connected devices. What do you think we as a a population need to think about in terms of ethics here?
I think it's tough because I mean, if you, I do. I'm fortunate. I still do a bunch of stuff with the .mil side of the world and the .gov side, and I remember standing in an amphitheater a couple of years ago and going, "All right, does anybody here not think we're at war?" And nobody put a hand up because there is an argument to say we've been at war for the last 15, 20 plus years with a number of our adversaries. Now, is it a friendly war? For the most part. Is it likely to ever become an unfriendly war? There's always that potential. You never know. And I think to your point, there's the conventional warfare now has gotten to a point where, is it really worth it? I can do so much more damage, so much more effectively and efficiently with one freaking laptop than I can with a smart bomb. Now, does a smart bomb have more shock and awe tactics? Absolutely. You drop a daisy cutter or a JDAM or something on a building and take the entire building down. Perfect. It actually sends a very clear message. But in this day and age, so does shutting down a hospital and killing a whole bunch of people. And then going, told you so, showed you so. And so I think that's where it gets really, really interesting now, because you look at it in a couple of different ways, and there's a few different ways. We all joke about the keyboard warrior. You've got folks who are actually jumping out of airplanes, getting out of helicopters, kicking off of submarines, who are physically there, likely to be shot at and blown up. And then you have a bunch of folks that are sitting on keyboards, and for the most part, we feel a lot more protected. If we are in a defensive situation or we're doing stuff, we feel a lot more protected. Oh, nobody's going to come after us because I've got a keyboard. That has now been shown to be incorrect. Israel showed it about a year or two ago when they figured out where one of their opposition's electronic warfare teams were and basically just dropped a bomb into the building out. That was like, you're on a keyboard, you're still part of warfare. So people's perceptions of what is in and out of scope, I think, has definitely changed on one hand. Secondly, the targeting is where it gets really, really interesting now. Do I just target those folks that are in uniform, or do I say to hell with it and take out more of the population? Do I take the population out, or do I work to influence the population? So now I look at one of two ways. Do I make your scooter stop from 60 miles an hour to 0, or all of your cars stop from 60 to 0 on the highway and cause multiple crashes? Do I take out a hospital? Do I take out your food supply? Do I turn a couple of ships over in the channel so you can't get stuff and go, told you so that we could do it? Or do I still go after military targets? Because the ease and the ability to go after civilian targets now is exponentially easier. I mean, it's so freaking easy. Or do I go after you from a human standpoint? And we saw it. United States has influenced more elections than everybody else put together. But now we're seeing that digital influence be used against us. We had it in the last election, the prior election. We'll see it from now on. We'll see it in more than just elections. We'll see it in more subtle ways. So the use of social media to divide a nation and the use of subtle influences to divide a nation becomes a much more effective and capable solution than dropping a single bomb. So are those capabilities there? Absolutely. Are they being used? Absolutely. And I think that's the question now becomes, how do we know and what do we do about it?
So it takes me back to the old "Remember kids, electricity will kill you" stickers in campaign. It's like, remember kids, cyber's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, I remember being scared shitless. In the UK, they had, I remember that there were 3. The electricity one was one. The 2 that always stuck with me, one was the farmyard one, because I grew up, I grew up in a couple, my father was British military as well, so we grew up in a bunch of different places. But I always remember at school being shown this safety video about like not fucking around on farms. And basically it just showed the kid getting, burnt to death in a hay bale and drowning in a cesspool. I mean, you want to talk about long-lasting impressions on you. That to this day still has an impression on me. And there was the railway one. But
Mm.
you're right. There needs to be one about these stupid things. I mean, seriously, we hand these things out like freaking candy. And yet and I've done this before and I'll do it again. So here, I apologize for any readers, but it's simple. I keep this on my desk. This is dangerous. This is
Mm.
dangerous over a short distance. This, I'll kill you from halfway around the planet.
Mm.
And we don't think about it that way. Let me just put it back again. We don't think of it. Yes, I keep it on my desk. And we don't think about it that way. We don't hand this over with a set of warning labels. We don't give this to people and say, hey, before you accept something, ask another question. Before you click on something, put yourself in a physical environment. Before you download something, here are the 3 things to ask, etc., etc. We don't do that. We just hand it over and go, hey, welcome to the internet. Stay connected. Good luck and have a nice day.
Here's your login. Please use strong authentication.
Yeah. P.S. Maybe think about changing your password because it probably sucks anyway. By the way, don't worry about it because we've got 10 different ways past the stupid thing. And that's a challenge, and that's a challenge for the older generation, my generation, the young ones, and then the rugrats that we're handing stuff to. And it's how do we get that message across to people to ask another question, to think a little bit more, to take themselves out of a digital realm and put themselves in the physical realm and go, what would I do if this person walked? I mean, it's always a very good friend of mine said it to me, and they said it way better than I could. And it was like, look, if on a digital world, I knock on your digital door and tell you I'm a prince from whatever country, and I've got $1 billion and I need to share it with you, but I need some money in advance to help move it. In the physical world, if somebody walks up to you and go, hey man, how's it going? So I got a chunk of money in the back of the car and I got $1 million in the back of the car. Can I borrow 500 to just go make a key cut? No. Why don't you just bust the car open and then spend $5,000 of that money?
Take some of your money.
Yeah. I mean, we don't think that way. We haven't figured out that physical, digital side of the world. And so unless we train and help people to understand that, it's going to get rough. Oh, it is getting rough. It's going to get rougher.
That annoyingly, it leads us to my very last question of the podcast, which is, what's going to be your moonshot for the industry? Like, what's the kind of giant leap for humankind that you want to leave as a bit of a legacy here to improve security in the lives of individuals as a whole?
On my epitaph, it'll be ask another question. And I mean, that's really, I joke about the fact I'm going to retire to an AS400 in New Zealand. So I am working pretty heavily on basically getting rid of the physical body and moving all of this into a digital realm. So I'm working pretty heavily on that one. And if we can do that, there's some interesting openings on that with some really freaking cool shit in the science and tech. But I think in my epitaph, it'll be just ask one more question. And that's it. I mean, that literally is it. Yeah.
I mean, this has been an absolutely incredible time with you. And I just want to say, like, thank you so much for taking some of the time out of your week to do this with us and be a wonderful guest on the podcast.
Thank you. Good luck to your point. It's just, these are fun things to do. You get some good people on it. So thank you. And thanks to everybody listening as well.
Oh, no, appreciate it. Well, thank you, everybody. And thanks for your time today, Chris.